The late afternoon sun streamed through the apartment windows as Michael got down on one knee. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears as she saw the small velvet box in his hands. After 5 wonderful years together, this moment felt absolutely perfect. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. They both laughed and cried, caught up in the pure joy of the moment. The ring was a simple placeholder. They had talked about picking out the real ones together, making it a special shared experience. Their love story had started at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. Michael had been manning the grill when Rachel walked in with her famous homemade potato salad. Their eyes met across the yard, and somehow they both knew this was the beginning of something special. 5 years later, here they were, ready to start their next chapter together. The next morning, they could hardly contain their excitement. They had been saving up for months, putting aside a little from each paycheck to afford the perfect wedding bands. Rachel had always dreamed of having rings that would tell their unique story, not just any rings from a catalog, but pieces they chose together with love and intention. "Let's check out that new jewelry store at the mall," Michael suggested over their morning coffee. "I heard they have an amazing collection." Rachel nodded enthusiastically, already imagining how it would feel to try on different styles and find the ones that spoke to their hearts. They spent the morning getting ready, wanting to look their best for such a special occasion. Rachel wore her favorite blue dress, the one that made her feel confident and beautiful. Michael put on a crisp button-down shirt and made sure his shoes were polished. This wasn't just any shopping trip, this was the beginning of their wedding journey. The drive to the mall was filled with excited chatter about their future plans. They talked about their dream wedding, nothing too fancy, just a heartfelt celebration with their closest friends and family. They discussed possible venues, color schemes, and whether they wanted a DJ or a live band. Every detail felt magical, wrapped up in the glow of their engagement. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," Rachel said, squeezing Michael's hand as they walked through the mall's main entrance. The jewelry store, Sterling and Gold, was known for its elegant selection and high-end service. Its sparkling window displays caught the light, seeming to beckon them inside. They had done their research, reading reviews and asking friends for recommendations. This store had a reputation for having one of the finest collections of wedding jewelry in the city. They had saved up enough to spend several $1,000s on rings that would symbolize their commitment to each other. Standing outside the store, they took a moment to compose themselves. This was a big step, choosing the symbols they would wear for the rest of their lives. Through the glass, they could see the gleaming display cases filled with diamonds and precious metals. Other couples were inside, leaning over the cases and trying on rings, their faces glowing with the same happiness Rachel and Michael felt. "Ready?" Michael asked, giving Rachel's hand another squeeze. She nodded, and together they stepped toward the entrance, hearts full of hope and excitement for this special moment they had been looking forward to for so long. Little did they know that their joyful afternoon was about to take an unexpected turn that would test their strength as a couple and impact their community in ways they never could have imagined. The automatic doors slid open smoothly, welcoming them into the brightly lit store. The air was cool and carried a subtle hint of expensive perfume. Glass cases stretched in every direction, filled with sparkling treasures that represented so many couples' dreams and promises. They were ready to find their own perfect symbols of love among them, eager to experience this milestone moment together. As Michael and Rachel stepped into Sterling and Gold, the excitement in their hearts began to mix with an unexpected feeling of unease. The bright lights above made everything sparkle, from the pristine glass cases to the diamond rings carefully arranged inside them. But something felt off about the atmosphere, subtle at first, like a slight change in air pressure before a storm. They noticed it in small ways initially. The sales associate closest to the door, who had been warmly greeting other customers, suddenly became very interested in reorganizing an already perfect display. Another employee, who had been chatting with a couple about engagement rings, kept glancing over at them while pretending not to. "Look at these," Rachel whispered, trying to focus on the beautiful rings in front of them. She pointed to a matching set that caught her eye, simple but elegant bands with a subtle pattern etched into the metal. Michael leaned in closer, admiring how the light played off the polished surface. A young couple walked in shortly after them. Within seconds, a sales associate approached them with a bright smile. Welcome to Sterling and Gold. Are you looking for anything specific today? The cheerful greeting echoed across the store, the same greeting Michael and Rachel had been waiting for but hadn't received. They continued browsing, trying to stay positive. Michael squeezed Rachel's hand gently, a silent gesture of support. They had been through enough together to recognize what was happening, but they weren't going to let it ruin their special day. They were here as customers, ready to make a significant purchase, and they deserved the same respect as anyone else. Maybe we should try the other side of the store, Michael suggested quietly. They moved toward a different display case, one featuring more contemporary designs. The rings here were stunning, bold, modern patterns mixed with classic elements. Rachel's eyes lit up at a particular set that seemed to perfectly match their style. Time ticked by slowly. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 15. Other customers came and went, each receiving immediate attention while Michael and Rachel waited patiently. They watched as salespeople eagerly showed rings to other couples, sharing stories and laughing together, creating the kind of memorable experience they had hoped to have. Rachel noticed an older woman who appeared to be a senior sales associate, watching them intently from behind the main counter. Every time they moved to a new display case, her eyes followed. It was the kind of attention they didn't want, not the welcoming customer service they deserved, but something that made their skin prickle with awareness. "We could come back another day," Rachel whispered, but Michael shook his head. They had every right to be there, and they had saved too long for this moment to let anyone make them feel unwelcome. Still, the joy they had felt in the car just minutes ago had been replaced by a heavy tension that seemed to fill the space between them and the store staff. Finally, after watching yet another couple receive immediate assistance, Rachel took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "We've waited long enough," she said with quiet determination. "I'm going to ask for help." Michael nodded, admiring her strength while wishing she didn't need to show it in this situation. As Rachel approached the counter, she put on her most professional smile, the one she used in important meetings at work. The older sales associate, whose name tag read Patricia, seemed to tense up as she drew closer. The other employees nearby suddenly appeared very busy with their tasks. The store's music played softly in the background, some generic instrumental piece that did nothing to ease the growing tension. Other customers began to notice the strange atmosphere, some glancing curiously between the staff and the couple who had been silently browsing for so long. Rachel opened her mouth to speak, ready to inquire about the wedding bands they were interested in seeing. But before she could get the words out, Patricia's expression shifted from tense observation to something harder, more confrontational. The moment stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight, about to snap. What happened next would turn their wedding ring shopping experience into something entirely different, a moment that would not only change their lives but would ripple out into their community in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The joy of their engagement was about to be overshadowed by an incident that would force them to stand up not just for themselves, but for others who had faced similar treatment in silence. The moment Rachel approached the counter, Patricia's demeanor shifted from watchful to openly hostile. The change was so sudden it caught Rachel off guard, making her pause mid-step. The soft background music seemed to fade away as Patricia's voice cut through the store's peaceful atmosphere. "I need you both to empty your pockets right now," Patricia announced, her voice unnecessarily loud. The demand echoed across the store, causing other customers to turn and stare. Rachel felt her face grow hot as all eyes focused on them. Michael quickly moved to stand beside her, his presence steady and supportive. "Excuse me," Rachel managed to say, her voice surprisingly calm despite the shock. "We're here to look at wedding bands. We've been waiting for assistance for over 15 minutes. She gestured toward the display case they had been admiring, where the rings they hoped to purchase gleamed under the bright lights. Patricia's response was immediate and cutting. "Several items have gone missing since you entered the store." She emphasized the word "you" in a way that made her meaning crystal clear. "Store policy requires that we investigate any suspicious activity." Her hand was already reaching for the phone, presumably to call security. Other customers had stopped their shopping, watching the scene unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, and a few seemed embarrassed by what they were witnessing. The other sales associates stood frozen, their faces a mix of discomfort and forced indifference. "We've been in plain view the entire time," Michael pointed out, his voice steady but tight with controlled anger. "Your cameras can confirm we haven't touched anything without assistance. Assistance we've been waiting for while you've helped every other customer who walked in." A young couple nearby, who had received immediate attention when they entered, shifted uncomfortably. The woman whispered something to her partner, and they quietly moved toward the exit, leaving their half-completed sale behind. They weren't the only ones. Several other customers were beginning to edge away from the unfolding scene. "Either show us the wedding bands we came to purchase," Rachel said firmly, "or please explain exactly why you've been watching us instead of helping us." Her professional composure was remarkable, though Michael could feel her hand trembling slightly as he held it. Patricia's response was to pick up the phone. "I'm calling more security," she announced, as if she were declaring a victory. "This is standard procedure for suspicious behavior." She emphasized the last two words while making direct eye contact with them, her meaning unmistakable. The next few minutes felt like hours. A small crowd had gathered outside the store, drawn by the commotion. Inside, the air felt thick with tension. Michael and Rachel stood their ground, despite Patricia's continued hostile stares and pointed comments about certain people and store policy. "We have money to spend," Michael said, his voice carrying across the now silent store. "We saved for months to buy our wedding bands. We have every right to be here." He pulled out his phone, beginning to document the situation. This seemed to agitate Patricia even more. "Put that phone away," she demanded. "Photography isn't allowed in the store." But Michael kept recording, capturing her behavior and the surrounding scene. Other customers had their phones out now too, some openly filming the incident. 2 security guards arrived, their presence adding to the circus-like atmosphere the situation had become. Patricia immediately approached them, speaking in hushed but urgent tones while pointing at Michael and Rachel. The guards' expressions remained professional as they listened, occasionally glancing at the couple. What happened next would reveal more about character and dignity than anyone could have expected. As the confrontation reached its peak, the true colors of everyone involved would shine through, not just Patricia and the couple, but the other customers and employees who were forced to decide how to react to such a blatant display of discrimination. The security guards approached Michael and Rachel, but something was different. Perhaps it was the phones recording the scene, or maybe it was the obvious disparity between Patricia's accusations and the well-dressed, professional couple standing calmly before them. Whatever the reason, this confrontation was about to take an unexpected turn that would have lasting implications for everyone involved. The security guards approached with professional calm, a stark contrast to Patricia's agitated state. "Sir, ma'am, could you step aside with us for a moment?" the taller guard asked politely. His tone was respectful, but the situation itself was anything but. Rachel felt her throat tighten as they moved to a more visible area near the store's entrance. More people had gathered outside, pressing their faces against the store windows. What should have been one of the happiest days of their lives, shopping for wedding bands, had turned into a public spectacle. "I need to see the contents of your bags and pockets," the guard said quietly, looking uncomfortable with the request. Michael and Rachel exchanged glances, both knowing they had a choice to make. They could refuse and walk away, but that would only validate Patricia's false accusations in some people's minds. "Go ahead," Michael said firmly, emptying his pockets. Out came his wallet, phone, and car keys. Rachel opened her purse, carefully placing each item on a nearby counter: her wallet, a small makeup bag, her phone, and a notebook where she had jotted down ideas for their wedding. The second guard, who had been watching Patricia's increasingly agitated pacing, spoke into his radio. "We're going to need a supervisor here," he said quietly. Something about the situation clearly wasn't sitting right with him. While they waited, other customers had formed small groups, speaking in hushed but angry tones. An elderly woman shook her head disapprovingly at Patricia, who was still hovering nearby. A young couple who had been trying on rings earlier approached the security guards. "We've been here the whole time," the young woman said. "This couple hasn't done anything wrong. They've just been looking at rings like everyone else." Her partner nodded in agreement, adding, "We watched them get ignored while other customers got help." Patricia's face reddened. "Store policy requires us to investigate any suspicious activity," she repeated, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. The growing number of witnesses and the obvious lack of evidence was making her position increasingly uncomfortable. A mall security supervisor arrived, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. He spoke briefly with his guards, then reviewed the items Michael and Rachel had displayed. Everything was in plain view. There was nothing even remotely suspicious. "Sir, ma'am," the supervisor addressed them, "I apologize for this inconvenience. You're free to go about your business." He turned to Patricia, his expression stern. "We'll need to have a conversation with the store manager." But the damage was done. The humiliation of being forced to empty their pockets and bags in front of dozens of strangers had left its mark. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she returned items to her purse. Michael's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "We've been saving for months," Rachel said, her voice carrying clearly through the now quiet store. "We came here to spend thousands of dollars on wedding bands. Instead, we were treated like criminals." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth and dignity. Other customers began gathering their things, many leaving without completing their purchases. The message was clear. They wouldn't support a business that treated people this way. Some stopped to offer words of support to Michael and Rachel, sharing their own contact information as potential witnesses. A younger sales associate, who had watched everything unfold, approached them with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This isn't right. This isn't what we're supposed to stand for." Her genuine remorse stood in sharp contrast to Patricia's continued defensive posture. As they prepared to leave the store, Michael noticed his phone was still recording. The entire incident had been captured, the baseless accusations, the public humiliation, and the community's response. What had started as a simple shopping trip had become something much bigger. Rachel touched the empty ring finger on her left hand, where she had hoped to try on wedding bands today. Instead of leaving with symbols of their love and commitment, they were leaving with a different kind of commitment to ensure this didn't happen to anyone else. The mall's normal buzz of activity seemed muted as they walked away from the store, heads held high despite the lingering sting of humiliation. But this wasn't the end of their story. In fact, it was just the beginning of a chain of events that would bring about unexpected changes, not just for one jewelry store, but for their entire community. The drive home from the mall was quiet, but not silent. The kind of quiet that comes when minds are racing with thoughts and hearts are heavy with hurt. Rachel stared out the passenger window, occasionally wiping away tears that she refused to let fall back at the store. Michael gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "We can't let this go," Rachel finally said, turning to face Michael. Her voice was steady now, the shock of the incident giving way to determination. "If we stay quiet, they'll just do this to someone else." Michael nodded, already pulling into a parking lot so they could gather their thoughts. They sat in their car, reviewing the video Michael had recorded. The footage was clear: Patricia's hostile behavior, the baseless accusations, the public humiliation. But it also showed something else. The other customers who spoke up, the young sales associate who apologized, the security supervisor who saw through the false allegations. "First things first," Michael said, pulling out his notebook. "We need to document everything while it's fresh in our minds." Together, they wrote down every detail: the time they arrived, the names of employees they could remember, the witnesses who had offered their support. Rachel's hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a sense of purpose. Back home, they sat at their kitchen table, laptops open. Rachel found the jewelry store's corporate office contact information while Michael started drafting an email. They weren't just writing about their experience. They were addressing the larger issue of how customers deserve to be treated. "Look at this," Rachel said, turning her screen to show Michael. She had found the store's social media pages filled with glowing reviews about wonderful engagement ring shopping experiences. "Every couple deserves that kind of experience," she said quietly, "not what happened to us." They decided to share their story on social media, not for revenge, but for awareness. Rachel recorded a video, her voice calm and professional as she recounted the incident. "This isn't about just us," she explained. "It's about making sure no other couple has their special moment ruined by prejudice." As they worked on their response, their phones kept buzzing. The young couple from the store had found them on social media and sent messages of support. Others who witnessed the incident shared their own recordings. The young sales associate who had apologized had sent a private message, offering to speak up about other incidents she had witnessed. "We should contact local news stations," Michael suggested, reading through the growing number of supportive comments on their post. Not to shame the store, but to start a conversation about how businesses treat their customers. Rachel agreed, already drafting a press release with her public relations background. They took breaks when needed, holding each other through moments when the hurt felt fresh again. Over dinner, they talked about how this experience, though painful, had shown them something beautiful too. The strangers who stood up for what was right, the community rallying around them. The response to their social media post was overwhelming. People began sharing similar experiences, not just from this store, but from others too. Local community leaders reached out, offering support and resources. A civil rights organization contacted them, interested in discussing the larger pattern these incidents represented. "Remember how excited we were this morning?" Rachel said softly, looking at her engagement ring. "All we wanted was to buy our wedding bands." Michael took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll still find our perfect rings," he promised. "But maybe we'll help make the experience better for other couples too." Late into the evening, they worked on their plan. They would approach this systematically, documenting everything, gathering statements from witnesses, requesting meetings with corporate leadership. This wasn't about revenge, it was about creating positive change. As they prepared for bed that night, their phones kept lighting up with notifications. Their story was spreading, touching people they'd never met. Other couples shared photos of their own wedding ring shopping experiences, both good and bad, opening up a larger dialogue about how people deserve to be treated. "Tomorrow's going to be busy," Michael said as they finally turned off their lights. Rachel nodded in the darkness. What had started as a horrible experience was transforming into something powerful, a chance to make a real difference. They fell asleep holding hands, their empty ring fingers a reminder of the work ahead, but their hearts full of purpose. By the next morning, their social media post had gone viral. Rachel woke up to hundreds of notifications on her phone, messages of support, similar stories, and offers to help from people across the city. The local morning news was already running the story, featuring clips from the videos taken by other customers in the store. "You need to see this," Michael called from the living room, where the TV showed footage of a small group gathering outside Sterling and Gold. They carried signs reading "Stop Profiling Customers" and "Love Doesn't Discriminate." The protest had formed organically after their story spread overnight. Their doorbell rang. It was a reporter from the city's most respected news station. "Your story has struck a chord with people," she explained, setting up for an interview in their living room. "We'd like to hear about your experience, but also about what changes you hope to see." As they shared their story on camera, Rachel was struck by how different this felt from yesterday. The hurt was still there, but it was overshadowed by something bigger. They weren't just two people who had been wronged, they had become the catalyst for an important conversation. Their phones kept ringing throughout the day. A local business owner offered them free wedding bands from his jewelry store. A civil rights attorney called to offer pro bono representation, but what touched them most were the messages from other couples who had faced similar situations but had been afraid to speak up. "Listen to this one," Rachel said, reading from her laptop. A couple from across town wrote about how they've been planning their wedding for months but have been afraid to go ring shopping because they worried something like this would happen to them. Michael sat beside her, reading the message. "We need to do this right," he said, "not just for us, but for them too." By afternoon, social media had exploded with a new trend. Couples began posting photos of themselves shopping for wedding rings, using the hashtag #LoveUsLove. Store owners across the city shared messages welcoming all couples, some offering special discounts to show their support for inclusion. The young sales associate who had apologized yesterday made a brave decision. She posted her own video, describing other incidents she had witnessed at the store but had been afraid to report. Her honesty inspired other retail workers to share their experiences of being pressured to profile customers. A community organizer reached out, suggesting they turn this moment into a movement. "What happened to you isn't isolated," she explained during a video call. "But your response could help change how businesses treat all their customers." Together, they began planning a community forum on retail discrimination. Local business schools contacted them, asking to use their experience as a case study in customer service training. A diversity consultant offered to develop a training program specifically for retail environments. What had started as a horrible shopping experience was transforming into an opportunity for real change. The mall management called a meeting with all store owners to discuss customer treatment policies. Sterling and Gold's corporate office couldn't ignore the situation any longer, not with protesters outside their store and their name trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. As evening approached, Rachel and Michael sat in their backyard, taking a moment to process everything that had happened. "Remember when we thought we were just going ring shopping?" Rachel said with a small smile. Michael squeezed her hand. "We're still going to find our perfect rings," he assured her. "But maybe we're also finding our purpose." Their phones buzzed again. More messages of support, more stories, more offers to help. A local church group wanted to organize a unity march. A wedding planning association asked them to speak at their next meeting about creating inclusive spaces for all couples. The day ended with an unexpected call from a national news network. They wanted to feature their story, not just focusing on what went wrong, but highlighting how the community had come together in response. "Your story is resonating with people because you chose to stand up with dignity," the producer explained. "You're showing people how to turn pain into progress." As they prepared for bed that night, exhausted but hopeful, they knew tomorrow would bring more challenges and opportunities. Their wedding plans had taken an unexpected detour, but their love had only grown stronger. Together, they were part of something bigger than themselves, a movement toward a world where every couple could shop for their symbols of love without fear or prejudice. 1 week after the incident, the CEO of Sterling and Gold's parent company requested a meeting with Rachel and Michael. The corporate headquarters had been flooded with calls, emails, and social media messages. The story had grown too big to ignore, and change was inevitable. The meeting took place in a downtown hotel conference room. Rachel and Michael arrived with their attorney, a civil rights lawyer who had taken their case pro bono. They went there for revenge or compensation. They had bigger goals in mind. "First, I want to apologize personally," the CEO began, his face showing genuine concern. "What happened to you was completely unacceptable." He slid a folder across the table, outlining the company's immediate actions. Patricia had been terminated, and the store manager was being reassigned pending additional training. But Rachel and Michael had come prepared with their own proposals. They presented a detailed plan developed with community leaders and diversity experts. "This isn't just about one employee or one store," Rachel explained. "It's about changing the whole culture of retail." Their suggestions included mandatory diversity training for all employees, regular audits of customer service practices, and a new position for a community relations coordinator. They also proposed a partnership with local organizations to create internship opportunities for young people from all backgrounds. The CEO listened intently, taking notes. "These are excellent ideas," he admitted. "We've clearly been behind the curve on this." By the end of the meeting, he had committed to implementing their entire proposal, not just in their city, but across all store locations nationwide. Outside the hotel, supporters had gathered with signs reading "Thank you for speaking up" and "Change starts here." The local news crews captured the moment as Rachel and Michael emerged with smiles, giving thumbs up to indicate success. The crowd's cheers echoed through the downtown streets. Back home that evening, they received an unexpected delivery. A letter from the young sales associate who had apologized to them. She had been promoted to lead the new community relations program. "Your courage changed everything," she wrote. "The store feels different now. People feel heard." Over the next few weeks, the changes became visible. Sterling and Gold transformed its windows to display diverse couples shopping together. Their new advertising campaign featured people of all backgrounds sharing their love stories. The company had turned their mistake into a genuine commitment to change. Other retailers took notice. One by one, major stores in the mall began announcing their own diversity initiatives. The mall management organized monthly community feedback sessions. What had started as one couple's horrible experience had sparked a retail revolution in their city. 3 months after the incident, Rachel and Michael finally found their perfect wedding bands at a small, family-owned jewelry store across town. The owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, spent 2 hours helping them try on different styles. When they found the right ones, there were tears of joy all around. "These rings mean even more now," Rachel said as they left the store, their new bands nestled in a velvet box. "They're not just symbols of our love, they're reminders of what we can accomplish together." Michael squeezed her hand, both of them feeling the weight of everything they'd been through. The changes continued to ripple outward. Their story became a case study in business schools, teaching future managers about the importance of inclusive customer service. Local newspapers ran follow-up stories about the positive changes in retail practices. Their city became known as a model for how communities could address discrimination constructively. On their wedding day, 6 months later, their ceremony included more than just their original guest list. Community leaders, supporters, and even some former protesters came to celebrate with them. The small family-owned jewelry store owner who sold them their rings sat in a place of honor. During their first dance, Rachel looked down at their wedding bands, now properly sized and sparkling on their fingers. "Remember when we thought finding rings would be the hard part?" she whispered. Michael smiled, pulling her closer. "Look what love can do when it stands up for what's right." As they celebrated into the night, surrounded by friends old and new, they knew their story would continue to inspire others. Their wedding bands had become more than just symbols of their commitment to each other. They were reminders that sometimes the most beautiful love stories include chapters about standing up, speaking out, and creating change that touches countless lives.